Hi, my name is Doug Vogt. I'm the director of the Diehold Foundation, and this is an introductory video on a series of books that I've written and research I've done over the last 40 plus years. And it has to do with an information theory of existence and how it also related to biblical stuff that I had found. The foundation was created in 1977, and its purpose was to do the research for an information theory of existence, which I call the theory of multidimensional reality. It was in my first book called Reality Revealed, the theory of multidimensional reality. The foundation's purpose was first a science one, and then what I had discovered after over the years caused us to also study some stuff within the Torah, which you'll find out in a second. I'll get right to the reason why you should be watching this video and the series of videos I'm doing. In other words, it's the elevator speech that everybody's supposed to get. And this is the reason why. There is periodical global warming, but the reason is not because of mankind and CO2. It has to do with the sun. And it's been building up for the last almost 100 years. We're going to have a polar reversal, a geomagnetic reversal, or also known as a polar reversal, within 28 years, between September and December 2046. That's when the next Gleisberg cycle is. NASA's hinting at we're in the process of a geomagnetic reversal, but they don't tell you what's going to happen during it, because they don't want to scare anybody. But it is on YouTube that people do know this thing's going to happen. A lot of scientists do also. But the information for it you'll find on two websites, dieholdfoundation.com as well as the publisher, vectorpub.com. So this is after I did Reality Revealed. It was out in January of 1978. I got a letter from Ken Kuzman in Federal Day, Washington. I was living in Bellevue, Washington at the time. May 9th. And there was more to the letter, but I photoshopped and just brought up the postscript he has here, which you should all pay attention to. It involves everybody. This is the reason why you want to listen and watch many of the videos. In reference to a latter part of your book, the book is this, Reality Revealed. 10 11, 10 was on pyramids found all over the world, and 11 was on the mythologies found all over the world. In reference to the latter part of your book, I have a cousin who is an astrophysicist and professor at the University of Alaska. In 1973, he told me over a drink of an impending disaster that takes place every 12 to 15,000 years. He said many scientists are aware of this, and that the covert reason for the space program was to explore the effects of the disaster throughout the solar system, i.e. moon landings, planetary probes, etc. He also said we do not have the technology nor the foreseeable technology to avoid this inevitable situation. All we can hope to do is gather information. If that doesn't get your attention, I can't help you. My background, and then you'll understand why I'm standing here and why I wrote so many of these books. The first book I wrote, as I said, was Reality Revealed. It was the very first time in history anyone developed an information theory of existence and applied it towards most of the phenomena in the universe. That's 45 years ago. It's a lot of time, 40 years ago. After that, from 72 to 2007 or so, I read the journals Science, Nature, Geology, Icarus, a bunch of others, from the mid-50s all the way to the middle of the mid-90s. Everything that has to do with my subject. And the first thing I noticed was, I also read most of the college text levels of geology, astrophysics, geophysics, physics, chemistry, read the textbooks. And there was a big difference between what I read in the textbooks and what I saw in the journals. It's like, I wouldn't say night and day, but a lot of the discoveries made in the journals proved the stuff in the textbooks wrong. Now, many of you who have a science education probably already had noticed that. But more importantly, my theory of existence is a pure information theory of existence. What you're stuck with, well, all mankind, is a matter-oriented theory of existence. And you don't even know why or how you got it. It has to do with Aristotle and Democritus, the Greek, before him. But Aristotle and the church loved Aristotle till about 1700s. Anyway, after that book, I wrote Gravitational Mystery Spots in the United States. It has to do with some gravitational anomalies on the West Coast, and where I had time measurements and size measurements. So I go through a little bit later. I'm going to try to do this video as an intro as quickly as I can so I don't run more than a half hour. Anyway, in November 97 and 99, I funded 2 geological expeditions to the Sinai Desert, where I found the real Mount Sinai and absolutely every altar that Moses mentions in Exodus, Leviticus, and Numbers. Every single one I found. I funded another one with my son in 2002, where I confirmed where the crossing was and found some stuff that Aaron had built to commemorate where the crossing was, and you'll see it in that video. There'll be a video on the entire expedition, both of them, and you'll see all the sites. So in other words, those who think that the Exodus was fictional and Moses was fictional and everybody else was, fictional characters do not leave physical evidence behind. Keep that in mind. Okay. I was the first person in 2,600 years that found the real Mount Sinai. Nobody before me, since Baruch, who was the grandson of Jeremiah. Anyway, the book I did in 2007 is God's Day of Judgment, the Real Cause of Global Warming. That's where I really put the whole thing together and actually figured out the exact number of years between polar reversals. 2015, sold my business and wrote 6 books while here. Today is March 14th, 2018, the very same day that Stephen Hawking died. 314, that's pi, 3.14, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, I'm going to try to keep the videos, each one between 20 and 35 minutes, because nobody wants to stay on the internet forever. I'm going to treat them like a class lecture. And you should, for the reasons I explained earlier, why you should be interested in seeing them. Now, when I found the number, the number of years between polar reversals is 12,068 years. That number is in fact embedded in the Torah. You'll see where it is. That's where the science wound up leading over to the theology part. I don't want to scare the scientists away who are generally atheists. I think you'll find my definition of God is acceptable to you. If not, you will cheer it on. But it explains why the Torah is actually holy, but not for the reason you think. But it is holy. Let me see what else. So anyway, some of the stuff, especially when I go into the polar reversal and the cataclysm, will probably scare you. But just keep in mind this. To be forewarned is to be forearmed. I'm doing these videos, and I wrote the books, to basically try to save, because this event is so bad. In fact, I had heard on the radio many years ago, I think it was in the 80s, that some anthropologists estimated that there were only 30 fertile females that survived the last ice age. That's extinction level. Even if they're wrong by a factor of 10 or 100, that's extinction level. Okay. This is the latest, the 3rd iteration of the theory of multidimensional reality. And I'll go through what's in it, what I prove. For those who are scientists, you should be interested in some of this. At least it's a totally different viewpoint of what you were taught in school, and what I was taught in school too. The first video will be on the top scientists, and I mean really top ones, who have always doubted something's wrong with what they were taught, for good reason. And you'll see it. And I'll also go into the Achilles heel of academia, both colleges and university. You've heard the expression, publish or perish. Well, it's the wrong end of the research. It's the money end of it before the paper's ever done. That's the Achilles heel. That's the problem of them getting the money and why they have to get the money. Finding the main clock cycle. If you say the universe is the product of information, you're part of a synchronous system, and you should be able to find the clock cycle. I found it 4 ways. 2 are totally irrefutable. The other ones are carbon-14 dating of ice ages, both from glacial moraine as well as volcanic material. There's a possible 5th, sea level changes. You'll see it for yourselves. I use in both in the first book and this 3rd iteration a videotape analogy and the computer analogy. The other thing we'll cover is the model of the atom using this information theory of existence, how it comes into this dimension. In fact, the screen after this you'll be surprised about, but it proves this one. You'll be amazed and shocked. I explain what light is and what time is. Remember Stephen Hawking wrote a whole book on time? I can explain what time is in 1 simple sentence with this information theory of existence. That's all it takes. I won't write a book on it. Currently photography, mostly the phantom leaf effect and what causes it and the proof of what it's showing us. What is gravity and what is mass? There's 3 Achilles heel to physics. One is they don't know what mass is. No matter if they found the Higgs boson, it's not it. In other words, when you stand on a scale, they don't know why you weigh anything. If all the subatomic particles that make up an atom have no value other than electron voltage, then what are you really weighing? Well, it's one of the many books I've read of the top scientists. I can't remember which one it was. When he was in a physics class, he asked his professor, "What is mass?" And the professor returned and said, "We don't know," and never asked that question again. In other words, every student in that room, including the guy who wrote the book, knew everything this guy said was wrong, and he knew it. Because the colleges and universities are in the business of selling you a degree, and never forget that. They're in business, in other words. The problem with output of quasars was a big problem. You're going to find out what it is. Redefining dimensions. String theory has 11 or 13 dimensions. M theory, I think, is 13, which can't be proven. I have 8 in this information theory, and it has to do with what is in this reality, what we see. I define dimensions more to the level of energy or potential that they have and can use, and also information it could access. The theory of multidimensional reality, one of my friends is a computer programmer and owns a PhD in physics. And when he read my 2nd book, God's Judgement, in chapter 3, he said, "You know, Doug, you found the philosophy that string theorists have been looking for." And he's right. I read a couple of books on string theory, and it's like the quantum physicists and the string theorists are at odds with each other. But they're both partially right and partially wrong. This theory makes sense out of the whole thing, but you'll understand very easily what it's all about. I explain in the theory what Planck's constant is, and you'll see a visible graph of what it is, Planck's time and length also, using this theory. Why the natural log appears. We don't know why e to the x shows up. There's 2 formulas that express it, but we don't know why it shows up in our reality in absolutely everything. Next is, oh, I went back. How did the universe start? Now, that's along with the Big Bang. That was one of the problems that Stephen Hawking had. He first said, well, From nothing came the universe. And obviously something has to create the universe. Something can't come from nothing. The theory explains it. You'll understand it immediately. Okay, that's what's in this book. And there's going to be multiple videos to it. The next is, surprising, creation of the Hebrew alphabet, the first physical evidence of a highly advanced previous civilization. Why did I put it after theory of multidimensional reality? It's real simple. That's the model that explains how matter comes into this dimension. This is the information dimension. These spikes are Planck's constant. This is Planck's time, and Planck's distance, I guess, would be as it goes along. But that's what it is. When I saw it, I knew exactly what it was. See this line here? It's a modified square wave, like digital. When you plot this, you realize this is an atom coming into this dimension. This is the atom as it spins in a toroid direction. This waveform is nothing more than this as it wraps around, as a ball turns around 360 degrees and goes in this pattern. This is what it looks like. 22 views of this waveform is the Hebrew alphabet. You got it? Moses said when he dumped the tables out of the hill, it was actually in the cave, not from on top. I have the advantage of knowing that because I found the hill, remember? He said it was the words of God and the writing of God. Well, he's not lying to you. He didn't create the design of the letters, and he didn't do the sequence of symbols on those tablets. So this is what it will cover. The formation of the letters. I don't know if I'll do all 22. I don't know if that will fit in one session. But you'll clearly see it. I had to create that 3D model, and I had to also build one. This is what I had to build in order to get the whole thing. This is one of the shapes. Recognize it? Now hold it like this, you can see it better. See that? Yeah, that's the origin of the heart shape. Now you know where it came from. The same thing is true for the Star of David and the Mandela. It all has to do with that alphabet. Then you convert the letters, the views you're looking at, that this thing is really vectors. Then you convert the vectors to planes. You recognize the form. Then you convert the letters in the thing to the planes, and you see recognizable forms. You substitute the letters in the Torah for the planes, and you start to see and understand what this thing really is. You'll understand also why Abraham purchased the cave of Machpelah, explains what Moses really pulled out of the cave, and then finally explains what the Torah actually is. And that will surprise you, but you'll understand why it's holy, but it's also the remnant of an extremely highly advanced previous civilization, most likely tens of millions of years more advanced than us. The reason why Moses puts the Garden of Eden story in there, he's telling us the people who put this technology in that cave. Next book, this is the one I did in, I think, 96. And, oh, by the way, the other one, the Library of Congress indexed it QA 76.889. That's quantum computing. You like it? This one's philosophy of science again. And so was God's Day of Judgment. Even though it had a biblical title on it, it was Q175. I'm covering the only parts I cover in this book is the time experience I did related to the general theory of relativity, the size changes found in the vortex, and the gravity changes. Another scientist, PhD, did the gravity experiments and came up with the same results I had with time. God's Day of Judgment. Again, Q175, in spite of it. It's a big book. It's really written like a textbook. The chapters I'm going to cover in this is really 8 and 12. 8 is everything, all the evidence on the Ice Age and polar-reversals. That's like 24 pages of endnotes in this book. But when I get done with the videos, there'll be multiple videos obviously, you will know what causes the Ice Age and why you should fear it or understand what's going to be happening. We are in essence that terminal generation. You'll understand what causes the ice fields. When they created the space program, they knew they had to look for the missing heat. The guy, Ken Kuzman's cousin, was right. You have to look for the missing heat that causes evaporation, which comes back on the Earth in form of snow and eventually becomes ice, an ice field. So, let me see whether that particular thing, when I figured this out, is in fact the greatest secret the United States has. There's no greater secret than that. I think it's because it scares so many people. I don't think more than 10 guys in government knew this great secret. I don't know how many know it now. And many of the people, this is back in the 60s and 70s and 80s, most of the retired or died, so I don't know. The evidence of the sun's nova on the moon, plenty of it. And on the Earth, carbon-14 dated the ice fields, the abrupt ocean level changes, formation of the deep sea canyons, carbon-14 dating of volcanic eruptions, sun-earth connection, evidence on Mars, lots of it. Like, where did the oceans and rivers go? You're going to understand why and what happened over millions of years and why it's further away from the sun and why it lost most of its water. But there's no question it had oceans. Mass extinction and the creation of new species. These are the two hardest, or the creation of new species, the hardest for anybody to figure out what causes the ice age. They know there's a reversal period, then you have sediment above for the ice age, and then you have new species. You have an older species at the time of the reversal, a lot of kill off, and then you have a new species based on the old, and they do not know why. I'm going to be telling you why. You'll understand. It all has to do with this reversal. Reality revealed. This is the granddaddy of all. This is what I wrote back in from 75 to 77. It was out early 78 or late 77, as I remember. And a lot of movies, about 5-6 movies that we know of, actually took the ideas from this thing, but I never got any credit. But in chapters 10 and 11, it's worth going over. It's more collateral proof that this event happened. It's basically our ancestors screaming from their graves of what happened to them. And here's some of them, like in Siberia, a great fire raged 7 days and the earth was burned up. Everything became sea. All the Tundras were consumed except the boy and a girl who rose up, blah, 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 an eagle into the sky. That's only one. There's another one from Siberia where, well, 17, 18 hours after the nova, last time the thing novaed over a longitude that will run through China and part of India. And the Earth stops its rotation for about 8 hours, 7 to 8 hours, and then it starts rotating in the other direction. So this dust shell takes about 18 hours to hit the Earth, and so Siberia was in the backside of the Earth. And if you ran a longitude through Brazil, is probably where the center of this thing hit when the dust shell hit. But they have a legend, and I put it in this chapter 11, where they say they saw the earth burning from both horizons. They weren't kidding. They're telling the truth. Here's another one, Volgasm. And, the inundation of the trees of all the forests were swept away. Now another one, at the close of the ages, it hath been decreed, all shall perish and vanish, each weak god of man, and the world shall be purged with a ravaging fire. By the Greek word for cataclysm, which is cataclysmos, when you take the word apart, it means combustion of the earth. Moses and the 10 code system. Like I said earlier, you cannot figure out the Torah and some of the prophets unless you come in from the sciences. Now, the scientists probably feel pretty good about hearing that, but I mean it's true. The ones that they knew was large numbering, small numbering. Some of them know adjacent letter swapping because the Talmud uses that, and a few may know the composite word code. The ones they don't know seem to have lost through time. The composite word codes, algebraic principle, A equals to B, B equals to C, therefore A is equal to C. Moses uses that quite a bit. The number 7, unless you found the real Mount Sinai, you have no idea what that number 7 represents. You will find out, and you'll see it. Chapter and verse codes. Number 40, 60, and 70 is a combination of chapter and verse. What has to do with where Jacob gives Joseph a coat of many colors or a long sleeve coat. It's not that. Some high priests figured the same thing I did long before me and created the legend and stuff like that. But you're going to find out what it really means. So when you see 40, it doesn't literally mean 40. The number 400, you'll know what that represents when they use it. The length of the sacred cubit. It's not 18 inches. It's derived from this, and you will find out how I figured it out and what it is. When you have that number, you can do you multiply the length of the sacred cubit, the real one, with almost any of the measurements that are given in the Torah, and it comes out to be a factor either this number, half of it, a quarter number, 2 times or 3 times the number. Ignore the decimal point. It's the sequence of numbers that is the message. And again, this number represents also, there is a code in here. I'm going to go to the next. There's an 11th code system. It's not Moses. It was God's. And I found it by accident. And it's irrefutable what I found. But like I said, the Torah actually gives an exact drop-dead date for this event, October 16, 2046. And that's dead center of when the next Gleisberg cycle will be, which is between September and December 2046. Now, when I wrote God's Day of Judgment, this was in chapter 11, and it was 2007. But this date hadn't happened yet. But as I left it blank, I knew something was going to happen then, and I put it in the book. I didn't know what was going to happen yet. But lo and behold, thanks to Obama, he changed Netanyahu's date he was supposed to see him to the week before when Netanyahu was supposed to give his speech. So he was forced to give it on October 1, right exactly on the date. So now you know what's going to start the Middle East war. That, when Iran builds a bomb and the Saudis and the Israelis find out about it, that's when the war is going to start. By the way, that thing has a whole bunch of, I found over 35 or 40 items that fall on one of these progressions of 12,068 days back or factors thereof. It's amazing. Okay, Volume 1, the scientists will only be interested in the latter part of it, the technology. I put in this book why Abraham bought the cave. The beginning part of the book, I'm trying to correct 3,300, 3,500 years of history. It's why he purchased the cave. Now, in the Torah it says he was 75 years old when he left his father, Terah, which is now southern Turkey. And his wife, we find later, was 10 years younger, so he's 65 years old. Well, they go to Shechem for an untold number of years, let's say 2 years. And then there was a drought and they go to Egypt. And supposedly the sons of the pharaohs see her and see how wonderfully and gorgeous she is. And they tell the father, and and the pharaoh marries her. And Abraham sells his sister / wife to the pharaoh. And it says, Pharaoh saw, blah, blah, blah. This is where it is. Chapter 12, 16. Abraham received sheep and oxen and he-asses and manservants, maidservants, and she-asses and camels. For a 67-year-old woman? I don't want to hurt any of the women's feelings, but men then married women to have children. After menopause, she wasn't having kids. So I knew something was wrong. And once you understand from the Hebrew stuff, they got a string of symbols, and they broke the letters later, sometimes arbitrarily. Moses made the first translation, or surface story, I should say. When I rebroke the string of letters where this verse was, it said he was Abraham, son of 5 and 70 years old. No way. You can't be the son of a number. And that was the case with all the numbers given about Abraham. And I rebroke it, and the new translation I got for that sentence matched the legends that some high priest created who must have known the real story. So he wasn't 75, she wasn't 65. He was probably in early 20s, if just 20, and she was in her teens. Then it makes some sense. It goes on from there, and you'll understand. It's interesting. Then later I explained the technology that was in the cave and the reason why he bought it. Volume 2 is on Joseph and the Hebrews. Again, I think I'm the first and only person to figure out who Joseph was in Egypt. Joseph was Sanmut, Sanmut was Joseph. He was not a fictional character. You want to see Joseph? There's young Joseph. See this? This is Hatshepsut's daughter with the Pharaoh Tutmosis II. 13 years later from this, he marries her because Hatshepsut gave her to him to marry. Here's an older Joseph with Baal or Hathor, the Egyptian version of the fertility god, the cow god. So this is what you're going to learn in this book and in the videos. Who persists Joseph and the love affair they had, what his name was in Egypt, and the proof of it. It explains why Joseph tells his brother when he finally reveals who he is, and the whole family moves down, God has made me father to Pharaoh. Because the daughter he has with Hatshepsut, she gave to Tutmosis III to wife. Now he was probably only 3 or 4 years old, and she was maybe 2 or 3. So Joseph, was Tutmosis III's father-in-law. He's not lying about this. Nobody ever figured it out, though. Who was the first daughter? That was the whole thing. What Joseph did as prime minister, and why 11 of the 12 tribes, not 12 tribes. Remember, he was freed by the Pharaoh. She's not going to marry her daughter off to a slave. She freed him, and that means his 2 sons, Manasseh and Ephraim, were free. They didn't go into slavery. By the way, 11 went into slavery, only 10 came out. That's why they added Ephraim and Manasseh as 2 separate tribes. It should have only been the tribe of Joseph. How did he get to vote twice? I mean, there's a reason why, and you're going to find out. Many of you are not going to like it, though, but it's the truth. And Moses gives all the clues for this stuff, by the way. Everything I have here, Moses gave the clues for it. You just had to know the 10 code systems, and you could figure it all out. By the way, it's the greatest story. A movie should be done of what happened to Joseph and what he did. It explains the whole thing. By the way, I think it's 23 or 25% of Genesis is on Joseph, directly or indirectly. In the expedition I found where Baal-zephon was, was a spent gold mine, and that's where he put the gold when he received the money from selling the grain. He then went to Baal-zephon, which was a spent gold mine, and then when he filled the cave up, he shipped it off to guess where. You'll have an accurate timetable, which I used from my chapter 11 in God's Judgement, and what I just showed you on the timeline thing, going back in time. I got the exact dates for things, for a lot of things. That's why I know it's an accurate telling of it. And finally, the relationship between the Ephraimites and Aaron, Moses, and their parents. It's the first corrected family tree of both tribes, both the Levites and the Ephraimites. And it's irrefutable. Moses gives literally all the clues. Third, I said I found the real Mount Sinai. Here's all the proofs. This book is my bigger one. It's about 250 pages. And with all the pictures, it has the whole Exodus route. The altars I found were, on the top was the sacrificial altar. East of that, about 50 feet, was the platform where the ark was. North of that, by 25 feet, was the remains of where the breadstand was. South of where the ark was the remains of the candlestand, equidistant. By the way, the distances between all these items that were on top of the hill matched my correct length of the sacred cubit, which is 24.136 inches. I found the first altar that Moses created. That was at the western southern part of the hill, more west than anything else. And it was an earthen made of 3 different types of clay, and you'll see we excavated it. We found the 12 standards just in the south part of the hill, and I had 2 other geologists. After I had found it in the first expedition, I had 2 others. One was a PhD in sedimentology, the other was a graduate of Colorado School of Mines. They confirmed that I didn't influence them. We made a grid. They found the 12 also, counted 12 too. Let me see. I found the location where the Ephraimites and the Levites were encamped. I found Aaron's altar, and 50 feet west of his altar was where I found the platform where the golden calf was, just about 4 or 5 feet from the edge of the wadi, exactly as Moses says. By the way, even in the Torah it says there was a stream that ran from the mountain past Aaron's thing. It was there. It's right there. It was everything that Moses described was accurate and there. I'll have in the book almost the entire Exodus round. I take it up to the Battle of Melech, because I'm not going to show you where the hill is, because too many people hate the Jewish religion, they hate Jews, and they hate Israel, and I don't want destroyed. It's as simple as that. The number of days it took, I was actually perfect. It's about 60 days. They leave about 2 days after the full moon, which is what the Passover was, and they arrive there 2 days after the full moon at the base of the hill. And anyway, you'll see what Goshen looks like. Sukkot is the origin of the holiday of Sukkos, which is in the fall. The reason why it's a 7-day holiday is because it takes 7 days to walk from Goshen to Sukkot, which is now called Tel El-Maskuta. And it was warehouses there, and you'll see the pictures of the warehouses. An archaeologist had excavated years before, and I corresponded with him, and he helped a lot. The crossing, when Moses went off to Baal Zephon to empty the last bit of gold in that cave, his brother kept the tribes busy, and he had a 6'2" high obelisk, stone obelisk made to commemorate where the crossing was, and I found it. For years it was on a map called Standing Stone. Nobody knew what it was. And I found it and took pictures, and you'll see it in that video. Anything else? Okay. You'll know who the Pharaoh was at the time of the Exodus. You're going to know how the ark worked and what I think it looked like. And there was 12 plagues, not 10. The other 2 is when he split the Red Sea and put it back together again. But most important about it is what he used. That rod was not a wooden staff in any way, shape, or form. In fact, the legends say it's not at all. They say it's a crystalline blue sapphire kind rod. So it's really regarding the technology. Once you understand that Hebrew alphabet is a remnant of a highly advanced previous civilization, then you realize the plagues did happen. It's how they were created and done, and how they were able to do it. This book I haven't published yet. It's in the middle of being written now. Should be done maybe by June, I hope. And it took me 11 months to dope this out. But basically, the prophet wasn't somebody rambling through the desert it wasn't at all. It was the high priest. If you remember in Exodus, it's only the descendants of Aaron who are able to sit in front of the ark. And therefore, all the priest class were descendants through Aaron. And I figured out basically they had a given name at birth, then they had a priestly name, generally when they became 20 years old. They started as scribes, by the way. And then finally, if they were the oldest son, the father died, the father was the high priest, they then adopted a prophet's name. They did it so the much stronger and more powerful nations around them, namely the Egyptians, the Assyrians, the Babylonians, or the Persians, wouldn't know how this thing is being used and take it from them. And that basically sums it up. You can read this here. It's, by the way, the actual numbers in what we call the Hebrew Scriptures, the Old Testament, totals 24,136 chapters and verses. The Torah has 6,034 chapters and verses. That's half the number. And you'll see what the Hebrews did to juggle it around to separate their books from ones they didn't like. But anyway, that's it. Hopefully I didn't run too long. Diehold Foundation is a 501c3. We take contributions to continue the work and do the next expedition, which hopefully is going to be fairly soon. I thank you, and hopefully you'll watch I'm going to start making the videos as class, and hopefully you'll enjoy it. I know you're going to learn a lot from it.